Good morning, Robert. Here, Robert. Everything okay with that? Great stuff, thank you. Morning, Mel. Morning, Ian. You're all okay? Bit of sunshine today for it on the first tee. There's been a significant increase in the amount of air traffic these past 3 or 4 days, which obviously is a good sign. So when the planes go over, I will sort of stop talking just for 20 seconds or so. They're not quite every 90 seconds as they were before the COVID-19 lockdown, but certainly a bit more frequently coming over. And road traffic, I totally agree with that. Yeah, the traffic around the club has become distinctly busier. Far more traffic on the roads. It can't be long now, can it? Alrighty, we'll give it a few more minutes and we'll get started. The place looks fantastic, though. What's interesting is that I checked the greenkeeper about it the other day, and he was saying about the natural repairing process of the golf course, as it's not being used at all. So no sort of foot traffic, which is does more damage when the ground's wet and muddy and what have you, you'd expect. No divots and no pitch marks on the greens. And what he's saying is now the divots are more or less knitting themselves together. So typically it takes about 2 months for a divot to knit itself properly, because every day we play there's fresh divots all the time. But because there's no fresh divots at all and they can sort of seed the ground and what have you, all the grass is like a carpet around here. So they're doing loads of good work. I think we'll be back on the golf course within the next month or so, won't we? It's gorgeous morning. Morning, Brian. How are you? But you'll see a marked difference in the golf course, almost damage free. Good morning, Helen. Hope you're okay. Bit of physics today, no biology, that's for sure. No chemistry. Morning, Simon. Hope you're okay. Okay, it's now 3 minutes past. We'll give it 1 more minute, and then we'll get cracking. Thanks, Robert. We're going to talk today about ground forces and the forces and the direction of movement in the golf swing. What goes where and why. Alrighty, so it is now 3 minutes past. I think we'll get started. A very, very good morning to you all. I hope you're all okay. Just saying a moment ago, there's been a distinct increase in the air traffic going over the club here. Not quite the 90 seconds as it would be normally. So there's certainly an increase in movement around. And as Ian Chapman said, the roads are getting busier. So I think it won't be long now. I think we're in the final stage of the lockdown. Alrighty, so what I want to talk about today is the direction in which the forces move in a golf swing. The most obvious angle we can look at a golf swing is head on here. And we look at the head and we think, oh, well, the club swings around the body here. We don't really see much other than the shape of the swing, the arc of the swing, going backwards, developing momentum and power, and then swinging through to deliver that power into the back of the ball and send it forwards. From this angle here, we get a bit more indication of the force's direction in the swing. So on the way back, my right side goes behind me, and the force of the energy goes that way. We would think it goes that way in the swing, but it doesn't. The force of the right side is going backwards And that creates the room for the hands and arms to swing into here. Now, when we look at what really creates power in a golf swing, it's leverage, it's arc, it's width, it's swing, and turn, all these words here. If I pull my right side backwards, I create an awful lot of width from where I started. And width is really measured from the left shoulder down to the club head here. If you look at the great photographs of Tiger Woods in his pomp, his swing was out here, super wide. The bigger the arc, the greater the leverage, the greater the power into the back of the ball. But what creates that arc and the space for that arc is the force of the golf swing going behind you that way. When we look at footwork, and we're going to do a lot of time on footwork today because we use the ground as a force. Imagine if you were trying to push something over, you'd steady yourself against the ground and you would push that way to send the force that way. If you tried to push and you had leather-soled slippy shoes on and the grass was wet, you'd simply fall over. You couldn't use the ground to push your force forward. A bit like the rugby players in the ruck. They use the ground and push against each other. Then when we create the backswing force going that way with the body, on the return to the ball, we create backswing force with the left side going that way too. I've got a fantastic couple of photographs to show you first of all, which don't always get the sort of exposure they should. And here we are. I'm going to start with Dustin Johnson today. Always described as one of the supreme athletes on the USPGA Tour. Sorry, excuse me. Now, I must tell you a very cruel story about Dustin Johnson. Another PGA pro was talking about him, and he said, Dustin's not the brightest guy on tour. In fact, he couldn't spell the word ox if you gave him the O as a head start. Anyway, he's a supreme athlete, and I'm not. I just thought it was a funny story. So if we look there, the most obvious thing everyone talks about with Dustin Johnson is this bowing of the left wrist here. The gloved hand bows that way. It takes a tremendous amount of wrist strength to actually achieve that. But the most interesting thing for us are how his legs move backwards and forwards. And the force of his swing there is towards his bum. If I then take you through to the next picture, he simply replicated that on the way through. So as he's pulled the club back to the top of the swing there, you can see his right bum cheek is much further behind his left heel, his right heel, I beg your pardon, here. So he's pulled his body weight this way. So what he does there, and we've talked about this exercise before, is he pulls the force of his swing and his body that way to create the space to lift the club up very, very high. Now, one would think, well, they're two competing motions. Something's going that way. How can it go that way? That's how the swing works. As we pull this way on the way back, that creates the space to swing the hands and arms up. Now, the work I do with a long driving coach is remarkable at what they do. They get these huge, heavy 20 kilogram, 50 kilogram weights, pull it to their chest, and they spend lots of time doing these sorts of exercises where they pull the right side backwards, but of course they've got 50 kilograms on the chest. Then on the way through, they do the opposite. And they pull this left side backwards and twist around. Where that pull and push comes from, on the return to the ball, when I'm coming through to here, it's from the left big toe. And they push that foot away, literally push it away. So let me show you some videos and show you how lucky we are to discover what we discover. It's never been any different. This is the beauty of golf, really. And like I keep saying to you, golf, everything's been hiding in plain sight. The world's best players have been doing it a certain way, and some of the world's best coaches have been writing errant nonsense about the swing. So let's have a look first of all here. Here's Wuzzy. Now watch this leg action here. Look at the knee action. I'll play it again in a second. Look at the activity in his knees. I'll play it one more time for the knee action. Just keep looking at his knees. Right one straightens, left one comes out. This time look at his feet. So loads of activity there. Wuzzy hit it miles. With disregarding how tall he was or what have you, he hit the ball absolutely miles. Now, Walter Hagen, I press play. Great video this. Now again, look at that left heel way off the ground. And then a huge stamp down as he pushes off that left toe And that yanks the club into position. And then swings through. So, what we're seeing there, not the fizzy strength of the fruit, lovely. What we're seeing there is the pros use an awful lot of activity. So the club, as though left foot heel raises here. Tom Watson, Jack Nicklaus, Arnold Palmer all got their left heel off the ground. They return it to the ground by stamping it down, but that force doesn't come from up here. It actually comes from that left big toe pushing down. So as they go to the top of the swing and pull everything behind them, we're now at the top here. They've got to get that force and energy going that way again. And they literally stamp down here, and that pulls that left leg into position. Think of the wuzzy motion. Huge amounts of knee action in that swing there. Now, if we then go to, again, another amazing bit of footage which I'd never seen before. Now, this is Bobby Jones. And Bobby Jones is just incredible. He set up Augusta National, set up the Masters. And the Masters was always classed as a tournament. It was never a competition or a championship, the Masters. It was always a tournament, effectively an invitees-only tournament. And Bobby Jones won 13 majors in 8 years. The Amateur Championship, the US Amateur, US Open, British Open, which were the 4 majors of the time. He also won the US PGA Championship, I beg your pardon. He then won 13 majors in 8 years, retired at the age of 29. And in that 8 years of winning, he got a degree of English literature, a degree in mechanical engineering, and a degree in law, and had a successful law practice. One of the few golfers to die very young, a bit like Sebi. Sebi died young, but Jones had a terrible illness as he died, as he aged. Right, watch his foot action here. You'll see his left foot has huge activity from the very beginning of the swing. So it's already lifting up. His knee comes across. Now watch this stamp on the return. Bang, bang. Now what I watch this time is look where his heel starts on the ground, at what angle it's at, and then as he returns back to the ball, he pushes the angle into a different position. The heel goes to a different line. Do you see? So as he takes it back, so at address, I beg your pardon, we can see the outside of his shoe. It's now starting to straighten, so we just see the back of his shoe. And then he pushes it to the outside of his shoe. Look at that motion. Wow. So why is that so important? Well, fast forward nearly 100 years, and we then get into one of my favorite photographs in golf, the World Long Driving Champions. Now look at his foot action. He's not trying to stay stable. He's not trying to stay, inverted commas, balanced. He is using the ground as a force. Now, this is all the stuff of the gods. We can apply some of it, but what's he doing there? He's literally pushing himself from his toes towards his heels. It's an amazing photograph, that. That drive went 400 yards into the wind, by the way. So in that photograph there, I'll do my best impression I can. He's gone that way, momentarily in the swing. He's pushed everything that way. And what's that done? It's forced the club right in front of him and created all that power. Again, counterintuitively, if he pushes this way, that creates energy this way. And what he's done in that swing there, as he's swung, is pushed all his energy behind him, back to here. And as he's come down, again, he's pushed it back with his left side. Now, again, remember what I said last time about the difference between motion and a position. We're only seeing something there at a thousandth of a second in the swing, but he's pushing and creating all this space and room here. One of the worst positions we see in golf is the opposite force, where members look like they're trying to smell the ball. It's not athletic. And also, what does it do? It narrows and cramps the arc of the swing. It's a very clear day today, and that plane's going over, so I'll just let the noise interference pass. He's not even on the ground. So another exercise these bombers do, which this long driving coach told me all about, is they jump up and down with a heavy weight. So they push back and jump, and then that and jump. And his view on creating true power is that when he's up in the air, he weighs nothing, obviously, because he's not on the ground. But as he slams and smacks back down, he creates even more force and energy. And these guys are looking for this extra second and this extra sort of ounce of power all the time. Now, if I then, again, reference the best player of all time, Super Jack. There he is. Now you'll see at the top of his swing on the right-hand pitch. So this pitch here, you'll see huge activity in his knees, and also great activity in his left heel. Now, in the next frame along, you can see big change in his foot position. Look at his left foot now; it's slammed onto the ground. And Jack Nicklaus said he started his downswing by slamming his heel to the ground and pushing himself towards the target. Now, this is where things get really interesting. Look how little the club head has changed position in those two frames. Look at the club's head. Look at the shaft of the club. A couple of degrees difference in the shaft angle. The movement of the club heads might have moved a couple of inches, but we've got a great photograph there of his left heel stamping into the ground. So that's when we talk about the transfer of energy. We know from all the pictures on the way back, that happens. The force and energy goes that way. From this dimension, we look at the swing here now. What's Jack Nicklaus doing from there? He gets to the top of his swing here, and he pushes that left heel down when we look face on here. That then sends a chain reaction at the body whereby the club gets pulled down. In the next frame, his left leg pulls this way, so the club is coming down and then creating a space for him to come through. So over the years, we talk about the swing. The club goes backwards and forwards. There's a huge amount of directional pulls in a golf swing to create all the power. And the best way I think of it right now in my game, or in the game, is it's almost like a right angle. We want the power going this way on the way back. That's the store of energy. But on the way through, when this pulls out of the way, that energy goes into the club head. And that sends the ball in the club head that way. So my backswing is all about how I can move my body to create tons of energy and power. Right side pulls right behind me. As it does that, that creates the first angle here, or the first pressure force going that way. On the return to the ball, it becomes 90 degrees now because I want the power from here pulled into the movement of the club head. Alrighty, so look at those pictures again so that plane goes past. You're right, Simon. Could be normality soon, or whatever the new normal is. So you can see there, huge pull down or push down or stamp down with that left side, but the club head hasn't gone anywhere. Alrighty, so let me get my notes up. Give me a second. Okay, so let's get back now to the Dustin Johnson swing sequence. Okay, let's get through these first of all. Okay, so that's a tremendous photo there. 1 second. Look at that. That's a great angle to look at the golf swing from as well. So remember what I said about it being 90 degrees? His left leg is being yanked right out the way, pulling his left bum cheek backwards. But look how the force and energy has been driven all the way down to that club head, and that club head's direction is towards the target. The best players in the world swing the club along the target for as long as possible. We talked about the width and the upright levers creating all that power into the very, very back of the ball. From there, big wraparound finish, and we still see there his left side is bumped backwards. So he's pulled himself out of the way to deliver that blow into the back of the ball. And there he is again at the top of the swing. I mean, look at that motion there. All that pressure and power and weight loaded up to his right bum cheek. And then look at the activity in the knees. Huge, big differences in the knees there. Lots of bend in the right knee, and the left knee is more or less perfectly straight. So let's see how we start. Let's go back 2 or 3 frames, and you'll see a reasonable amount of flex in his left knee, which is mirrored in the right knee because we can't see it. But as he comes through impact, he's working those huge levers. Comes through to the top of the backswing, I beg your pardon. And look at that, massive range in his legs. So, has the golf swing changed much? Well, let's have a look. So Brooks Koepka is, without doubt, the most dominant athlete in major championships the past few years. And here he is compared by one of the people I follow on Twitter with a chap called Jim Barnes. Jim Barnes has won 3 major championships, 4 major championships in total, but he won the US PGA, the Open Championship, and the US Open, and he was an Englishman. Very, very untalked about, sadly, very forgotten about. Now look at that. So Jim Barnes, long Jim, he was 6'4". That's 100 years ago, a 100-year difference between the photographs, and look at the activity in the knees as they come down. So poor old Jim Barnes had to work it out with wooden clubs, golf balls that weren't even round. The camera shots would have been very rudimentary. If you just look there at the angles of his arms, both arms of the players, the shaft angle, the angles in the knees, now you think how intelligent and how hard-working those old day pros must have been. So they've got themselves into those positions without the benefit of TrackMan, without standing on the shoulders of giants of previous generations, no videos, no Twitter feeds. It's absolutely remarkable, isn't it? So that gives us great reassurance, and that's just the money shot, isn't it? This gives us great reassurance that physics hasn't really changed. It's just that we've got easy ways of measuring it now. And I must say as well, even my generation of pros, the pros who taught us talked a lot about the art and the feel and the sort of the non-scientific part of the game, and they wouldn't get into the science because they didn't know it and they didn't believe it to be worthwhile, in fairness to them. So they only could teach with what they had. Now, of course, we can teach and really get into the science of the swing. It's fabulous stuff to talk about. So if Jim Barnes' swing hasn't changed, then what he's done there, he has worked out 100 and whatever it was 20 years ago, the forces in the swing there. So what does that mean to you? Well, exercises at home, get some activity in the legs, get some range and some motion here. And what you'll find first of all is that you might sort of wobble or top around a little bit, but the energy goes backwards and forwards like this with the legs. If you get your legs really active, it creates room and space for the upper body to swing into. So, let me just give you a couple of little bits of irrelevant data here, which I quite enjoy. Jack Nicklaus, I watched a video of the 1990 US Masters, which Faldo won. And in the final round, Jack was 50, so it's exactly 30 years ago. Jack was 50, and he was out driving Faldo by 25, 30 yards. And Jack was regularly getting to 300 yards at the age of 50. So the reason why I keep harping on about Jack Nicklaus, you'll see me use him as a reference point all the time, is that whenever I'm looking for information or data, it's just simply the sort of the magnet for the best amount of data. Jack Nicklaus carries a money clip with him, which he won at a long driving competition. And what used to happen before all the big events, not necessarily the major championships, but the tour events, is they would hold a long driving competition for all the pros. And Jack won his in 1963 with a drive which was 364 yards and 1/4 inch long. Think about 364 yards and 1/4 inch. That's like driving at 30 yards to the back of the first hole today. So that's how powerful he was. Now, when I'm watching his swing, it hasn't changed over the years, and he's given us all this information about the ground forces. How he did it. And now, of course, we all think we're super clever because we're reinventing the wheel. But let's look now at Jamie Sadlowski, one of the world long driving champions. I mean, just remarkable, that photograph. But again, look at the left heel, way off the ground. Look at the activity. Let's work from the ground up. Look at the left heel, way off the ground. So it tells you there's no pressure on that heel, but there's going to be an awful lot of push towards it very soon. Bags of activity in the knees. And that knee activity is what's created the hip, inverted commas, hip activity. Now remember, I said I don't really talk about hip turn anymore because the hips have got such a small range of motion. If the legs work really aggressively, that creates all the room for the body to pull into. So I don't talk about twists or turns anymore. If that right side goes backwards, it creates all this lovely room for the right side of the body to pull itself into and create all this power and space. Then what he does, because he's made the body go all the way around his spine, look at that glove arm, look at that lever arm. Now their drivers are about 10 inches longer than your driver. So the standard driver now is about 45.5. When I first turned pro, it was 43. A tour professional's driver would be 43. We now sell them in the club shop 2.5 degrees longer. They're up into 50, 51, 52 degree. Super heavy shaft, extremely strong because they snap them all the time. They're about £1,000 each, those shafts, they're specialist shafts. And then what he does, he takes that huge lever with his left arm and he works it as high as he possibly can up here. And the reason for that is that the arc then stays square to the back of the ball for as long as possible. None of them swing flat around here. So when we're talking about the swing plane, what's the optimum angle to strike the ball from? Most of us operate somewhere between here and here. On the tour, the straighter hitters are down here, the longer hitters are up here. The super long hitters who don't care about finding fairways, they just look at it the ball 400 yards, get that space, that lever right up here. So the body falls right out the way to create all that room for the levers to come into. We then a high swing path. You're absolutely. There's about a 10-second delay, I think, between what I'm saying and what you're typing there, Ian. You're absolutely right. They do swing on a very, very high swing path. Now, or what we call a high swing plane. There you go. There's 3 more of the monsters. I mean, they're just remarkable, aren't they? They're just absolutely remarkable. Now, in those, interestingly, all 3 of those players keep their left foot planted on the ground. So as I've said to you before, there's no absolutes. There's not many absolutes in golf. There are lots of negotiables, but they must be double jointed, those 3 pros there, to be able to get their body into that position. Now, Mel, you're absolutely right. Greg Norman did used to think right pocket back. Now, you look at those guys there; they're all pulling right pocket back. Now, I've shown you this before. It's worth reminding you. What you see in those positions there is the long lever is vertical. I can't even do it without having to turn my body around. Their lever is vertical and their head's looking down at the ground. Now you think of the strain on those bodies. Like I say, they must be absolutely double jointed to be able to achieve that. So the Nicklaus, the Greg Norman comment you just made there about the right pocket back. Let's look at Long John Daly. That right leg's out the way, that right pocket's out the way. And again, there's Big Jack. And Jack was a huge hitter with the ball. They measured his swing on a sort of state-of-the-art swing measure of its time back in the 1980s, and it was at 120 miles an hour. And that's the sort of swing speed now the tour pros are getting to. Now, interestingly, when we talk about all these stats and data, I'm going to do a session next Saturday about the Tour Pros stats and the Tour Pros data. You know, Nicklaus was long, Tiger Woods was long. I mentioned to you last week that the longest ever driver on average at Augusta National was Tiger Woods at 324 yards. No one's ever got better than that. Now, what happened was between 1997 and 2002, so 1952 to 1997, in that spell, the world's best players gained on average a foot a year. So every 3 years, they gained a yard. Course conditioning was a bit different, obviously. And then in 1997, the modern ball, which we use today, came into existence. And the pros gained 7 yards in 5 years. So that new ball hit the ball so much further. Alrighty, are there any questions from you at all about what we're talking about? And I've got a bit of noise interference now. That should go in a second. Any questions about what we talked about? Let me go get the noise off. Sorry about that. One of the greenkeepers had a blower. All right, the technology of the old ball, the new ball, I beg your pardon. So when it went from the old ball to the new ball, the old ball basically had a rubber core filled with liquid glue, stayed liquid all the time, and that was wrapped in loads of elastic bands, and then covered in what's called a ballata cover, which is a natural sap from a tree, I think, where ballata came from. It was very soft, and it would spin an awful lot. And to get real power with that, you had to be a huge hitter of the ball. So then in 1997, they put the one to a two-piece ball. So a very solid core, and they just wrapped a very thin cover around it. And they managed to get it to spin enough. Now, if you go back to footage of Greg Norman spinning the ball back in the 70s and 80s and what have you, he'd hit the ball to the back of the green and backspin it all the way. And it was a great skill for the pros to watch, but it was a completely redundant skill in terms of getting the ball close to the hole. But the ball spans so much, and the harder they swung, and the faster they swung with the irons, the more the ball would backspin. So when they went to the harder ball, the pros loved it, because they could still spin the ball enough and get the ball to stop, but it won't spin backwards. So they lost that part of the problem and that part of the spin, but the ball went absolutely miles. And so they very quickly gained all this distance. Now, the game is in danger of having many of the great championship courses become obsolete, because the ball does travel too far and the equipment travels too far. Now, Nicklaus, Hagen, all the players I've mentioned today, they would all have used the top technology if they could. So it's not the player's fault, it's not really the manufacturer's fault, it's the governing body. You've got to say, well, let's put an end to this. And very interestingly, about 10 years ago, Jack Nicklaus hosts what he calls his Captain's Club once a year at his club in Muirfield Village, Ohio. And at the lunch and the event at the time, Arnold Palmer, Jack Nicklaus, Gary Player, Michael Benalek, the best amateur golfer we've ever produced, who led the R&A for 20 years, and also the head of the LPGA. And they got together and they wrote a letter to the governing bodies saying, look, we all think the ball's going too far. It's too powerful. Why don't you do a ball for the amateurs and a ball for the professionals? Make sure the amateurs can enjoy the game and hit the ball as far as possible, but make the pros play with a ball which is less powerful. All they got back from the governing bodies, and don't forget, Michael Benalek used to run one of the governing bodies, the R&A. Anyway, so they got the letter back, and it said, they got a response. They got a response. The response was an acknowledgement. We've got your letter. Thanks very much indeed. So Michael Benalek went back the following year with Nicklaus, said, we've not had anything back about this letter. So Benalek did some more digging. And what he found, you can see the letter online, and Michael Benalek tells the story, is he did some digging, and someone wrote to him and said, look, this is the memo we got sent. It was a picture of the letter with a big question mark on it. It said, have you seen the age of these guys? So the governing bodies would not listen to Arnold Palmer, Jack Nicklaus, Gary Player, Michael Benalek, head of the LPGA, about the ball. And so that's the situation that we're in at the minute. There's no other sport where the equipment is now outgrowing the game at the top level. And ultimately, it's not that interesting, I don't think, watching the tour professionals hitting a 7-iron 250 yards, because the skill element is much reduced. It's a very different skill. It's a bombing skill now. If you look back at the old skills of the players where they're hitting the ball 230, 240 yards with 3-wood or a 4-wood or a 5-wood, the game was much harder. Now, when I played with Ian Woosnam, we were talking about the short game, and I said, would you go, because when Woosie won the Masters, his most lofted wedge was 53 degrees. Think of that, the major winner with a 53-degree sand wedge. And if you look at most pros now, they have a 60 or a 62 or a 64-degree sand wedge in the bag, so 10 degrees of difference there and thereabouts. And I said, would you go back to the old clubs and the old ball, or would you rather have the new lofted clubs and the modern ball? He said, I'll go back to the old ball tomorrow. So the old school guys definitely want to get, they preferred the movement and the softness and the feel of the old ball, especially guys like Woodsy who hit it so far anyway. So the technology, it's come to an interesting crux at the minute. Like I say, the amateur golfers should be given as much help, as much enjoyment to the game as possible. The modern equipment has elongated the game for many senior golfers, loads of senior golfers. And when I first started coaching, if you were a good player, you would hit the driver. Most amateur golfers should have been hitting a 3 or a 4 wood off the tee. But now a driver is the first club we sell to a beginner. A good player now is someone who can hit 5 or a 6 iron. Alrighty, any more questions about what we talked about? Anything else you want to discuss about the movements and the shapes and the ground forces in a golf swing, or why the pros do what they do? And what I've done today, hopefully you'll see, is I've used reference points from 100 years ago and just show that the same principles apply in the modern day. Doesn't mean to say we can all do it, or we should do it, but I'm showing what the elite, high performance, best players in the world, and longest hits in the world have always done. So any more questions for me? Next week, we're going to talk about stats. It's all pro stats. And there's some really illuminating information in that stuff. I mean, even when I read it, I'm looking, I've read this time and time again, it still surprises me. All right, folks, it sounds like no more questions. Okay. What was the plane noise like? Thank you very much, Helen. But what was the plane noise like? Is it too much to be out here? Or would you rather me be inside? now you're getting active. Alrighty, so thanks for the anecdote. Sorry about the planes. The physics lesson is action and reaction are equal and opposite. That's great. I love that. I should use that really, action and reaction. Any good exercise to do at home when we don't have 50 kilogram weights? Yes, movement. The most important thing you can do right now, Simon, is get some motion in the legs and some swing in the arms around here. Do those things, and you'll feel your body sort of getting back into a golf exercise motion, really. Because it does feel different when you're not playing and swinging and using the ball, using a club at home or on the golf course week in, week out. Boy, oh boy, does it feel different. 2 or 3 clubs in the hand and get swinging as well. Get some strength back in the swing. Alrighty, well, listen, great to interact with you all again. Any questions, send me an email in the week, richard.harrison@roehamptonclub.co.uk. And I look forward to seeing you all next Saturday, and we'll talk about tour stats. And I look forward to seeing you all then. Thanks very much for tuning in. God bless. I hope you all stay healthy. All the best.